You clicked because somebody told you the Amish are running lights, fans, and freezers off the sun without paying a dime to the power company. That's true. And it's simpler than anyone out there wants you to believe. You can build it yourself this weekend. With panels you can buy today, a box the size of a lunch pail, and a battery. No contractor, no engineer, no 3-page bill from the electric company waiting at the end of the month. Here's the bold part. Said plain, a small solar setup built the way we build it will outlast, outwork, and outsave the fancy grid-tied systems the salesmen push on you. The people out there have made solar feel like rocket science on purpose. We never bought that. We figured out the quiet version generations back, the same way we figured out ice houses and root cellars and windmills, and we kept it close because it kept us free. Stay with me, because near the end I'll give you the one trick about cold weather and panel placement that almost nobody outside our settlement seems to know. It's the kind of thing you'd only learn from a man who's wired these things by lantern light. And it works on the house you already own, not some dream house, the one you're sitting in right now. I still remember the first real solar rig I ever saw out past Mount Hope in Holmes County, Ohio, on a cold gray morning in late October. There was frost on the buggy seats, and the man's panels were ticking faintly as the sun hit the cold glass and warmed it. That little ticking sound was electricity being born, and I never forgot it. Now, let me tell you why most folks never get there. Most people who want solar do the same thing. They call a company, a man in a clean truck comes out, walks the roof, and hands them a number. $20,000, $30,000, sometimes more. And that's after the so-called discount. Then he tells you about a loan, a 25-year loan. So you trade one monthly bill you hate for another monthly bill you hate, except this one has your house attached to it. That's not freedom. That's just a new landlord. And here's the part that really stings. A huge chunk of that price isn't the panels at all. The panels are the cheap part now. The price is the labor, the markup, the permits, the salesman's commission, the financing company taking their cut. You're paying for everybody's lunch but your own. I've watched good, hardworking people sign those papers because they were told solar was too complicated to do any other way. They believed they needed a professional for every single piece of it. They believed wrong. And it cost them tens of thousands of dollars to believe it. Think about what that money really is. That's years of your life. That's mornings you got up in the dark and went to work. You're handing it over because somebody convinced you the sun is complicated. The sun is not complicated. A solar panel is one of the simplest, most patient machines ever made. It has no moving parts. Nothing spins, nothing burns. It just sits there in the light and quietly turns daylight into power, day after day, for 25 or 30 years, asking for almost nothing in return. We understood that early, and we understood why it fit our way of living. We already lived without depending on the grid. We already heated with wood, cooled with spring houses, lit with oil. So when these panels became cheap and reliable, a lot of our people looked at them not as some modern miracle, but as just another quiet tool, like a good axe, like a sharp plow. But here's the thing, the outside world never quite grasped about how we do it. We don't try to power everything. That's the first secret, and it's free. The English way, the modern way, is to build a giant system that can run a whole house full of things running all at once. Air conditioning, electric stove, electric dryer, a dozen glowing screens. To run all of that off the sun, yes, you'd need a fortune in panels and batteries. We don't do that. We start with what actually matters. Light, a fan in summer, a way to keep food cold. A way to charge the tools and the lamps and the things that make a day easier. And once you shrink the job down to what you truly need, the whole thing gets small and cheap and something a regular person can build with their own two hands. And if you want every detail mapped out for you before you buy a single part, I want to tell you about something that'll save you a lot of trial and error. Everything I've just described and a great deal more that I couldn't fit into one sitting is written out step by step in the Home Energy Blueprint. It's a digital book, the kind you can have in your hands in the next few minutes, and it covers the full system: panels, controllers, batteries, wiring, placement, cold weather tricks, all of it written plain, the way a neighbor explains a thing, not the way a salesman does. There's also the Off-Grid Home Blueprint and the Complete Home Energy Field Edition if you want to go deeper, and they're all available for $97 at the link in the description. That's less than 1 month of the average electric bill in this country for knowledge that can change every month after it. If you're the kind of person who'd rather hold the whole map before you start walking, that's where to go. But for right now, let me walk you through it the way I'd show you if you were standing in my shop, the way it was shown to me. You need 4 things, just 4. A panel, a charge controller, a battery, and a little box called an inverter. And I'll even show you how to skip that last one for some of it, which is part of the trick at the end. Start with the panel. This is the part the title promised you, so let's talk straight about it. A panel like the Sungold panels, the good rigid ones, is a sheet of solar cells under tempered glass in an aluminum frame. You've seen them. What you maybe don't know is how tough they are and how little they ask of you. They make foldable ones too, the kind you can carry out to a field and unfold like a quilt, and those are wonderful for a man who moves around or wants to start small. And they make the big rigid ones you bolt down and forget about. For a home, you usually want the rigid ones. They're built to take hail, wind, snow, load, and decades of weather, and they keep producing the whole time, just very slowly losing a tiny bit of strength each year. After 25 years, a good panel is still doing around 80% of what it did on day one. Show me another machine you can buy that still does 80% of its job after 25 years with zero maintenance. A single decent panel today might give you somewhere around 200 to 400 watts in full sun. Let me make that real, because watts mean nothing until you can feel them. One good panel in strong daylight can run a laptop, charge your phone, run a couple of bright LED lights, and still have a little left over. 2 or 3 panels, and now you're keeping a small chest freezer cold and running fans through a hot afternoon. 4 to 6 panels, wired right, and you're into real territory, the kind of setup that quietly carries a small home's daily needs. And here's a number that ought to make you sit up. The price of these panels has fallen so far in the last 15 years that it almost doesn't seem real. What used to cost a man $4 or $5 per watt now runs a fraction of that. The panels got cheap. The honesty about how cheap they got somehow did not travel as fast. I'll let you decide why. So you've got your panel soaking up light, but a panel by itself is a wild thing. The power it puts out goes up and down all day. Clouds pass. The sun climbs and falls. You can't feed that raw, jumpy power straight into a battery, or you'll cook the battery and ruin it in no time. A battery is patient, but it is not stupid. It needs to be fed carefully. That's the second piece, the charge controller. This is the little box, and it is the brain of the whole rig. It sits between the panel and the battery, and its only job is to take that wild daylight power and pour it into the battery at exactly the right rate. Not too fast, not too hard. It tops the battery off and then backs away so nothing gets damaged. Now, there are 2 kinds, and this is where folks waste money. So listen close. There's the cheap kind and the good kind. The cheap kind is fine for a tiny setup, a single small panel keeping something topped up. But the good kind, the one worth paying a little more for, squeezes noticeably more power out of the same panels, especially on cold or cloudy days. We're talking the difference between throwing away a good chunk of your free sunlight and actually catching it. On a real home setup, the good controller pays for itself the first season. Buy the good one. That's not the salesman in me talking, because I'm not selling you anything. That's just true. So now your panel is feeding your controller, and your controller is feeding your battery. The battery is the heart of the whole thing, and this is where the magic really lives, because the battery is what lets you use the sun at night. Think about that for a second. The sun goes down, but your lights stay on, your freezer stays cold, your fan keeps turning. Because all day long, while you were out working, that quiet panel was filling a battery, and now at night, you're spending what you saved. You're living on stored daylight. There's something almost holy about that if you let yourself feel it. You're not borrowing from a company. You're spending light you caught yourself. For generations, our people stored things against the dark times. We canned in summer for the winter. We cut ice in January and packed it in sawdust to keep cream cold in July. We filled the woodshed in fall so the stove would never go cold. A battery is the exact same idea, just done with electricity instead of ice or jars or firewood. Store the surplus when it's plenty, live on it when it's scarce. That's not modern. That's the oldest wisdom there is. We just pointed it at the sun. Now, batteries, there's the old kind and the new kind, and I want to be honest with you about both. The old kind are the lead acid batteries, the same basic thing that's been around since your great-grandfather's day, like a big version of a car battery. They're cheap to buy, but they're heavy, they need a little care, you can only safely use about half of what's in them, and they wear out faster. A lot of our people started there because the price to get going was low, and there's no shame in starting there. The new kind are the lithium batteries, the lithium iron phosphate ones especially. They cost more up front, but they're lighter. You can use almost all of what's in them. They don't need babysitting, and a good one will give you thousands of cycles. Thousands! That means it'll charge and drain every single day for 10 years or more and still be standing. When you do the math over the life of the thing, the expensive battery is usually the cheaper battery. That's a hard lesson, and most folks have to learn it twice. So that's 3 pieces: panel, controller, battery, and with just those 3, you've already got something powerful, because a lot of the best things in a home run on the same kind of power the battery stores, that's the part nobody tells you, and it leads right into the trick I promised. So hold that thought. The 4th piece is the inverter. The battery stores power as DC, direct current, the same kind of power that's in your car, your flashlight, your cordless drill. But most of the things in your house run on AC, alternating current, the kind that comes out of the wall. The inverter is the little translator that turns the DC from your battery into the AC, your toaster and your blender. Expect you plug it into the battery, and out the other side you get a normal wall outlet, just like the ones in your kitchen. And that's the whole machine. 4 parts. A panel catching light, a controller feeding it in gently, a battery holding it for the dark, an inverter turning it into the everyday power your house already understands. You could lay all 4 of those out on a kitchen table. There's no mystery in it. There never was. Now let me tell you who buried the mystery. Because by now, you're probably feeling a little sore, and you should be. Somebody profited every single time you believed this was too hard to do yourself. The installer profited, the financing company profited, and the power company, well, the power company has the most to lose of anybody if you ever figure out you don't fully need them. Think about how the whole system is shaped. For 100 years, you've been trained to be a customer. The power comes from far away, made by people you'll never meet, sent down wires you don't own, and you pay for every bit of it forever, and the price only ever goes one direction. You never owned the means of your own light. You rented it your whole life. We never sat right with that. Not because we're against electricity. Plenty of our communities use it in careful ways. It's because we don't like depending on a system we can't see, can't touch, and can't fix ourselves. A man should be able to understand the things that keep his family warm and fed and lit. If you can't understand it, you don't really own it. It owns you. And here's where the rules come in, because now you're invested enough to hear it. Once you start looking into doing this yourself, you run face first into a wall of permits, inspections, codes, and fees. In a lot of places, you legally cannot connect your own solar to the grid without a licensed professional signing off, without the utility's blessing, without a stack of paperwork and fees that can run into the thousands before a single panel goes up. Now, some of those rules exist for honest safety reasons, and I won't pretend otherwise. Tying into the grid badly can hurt a lineman. That part is real. But ask yourself, who wrote most of those rules and who sat in the room when they were written? The same industries that profit from your dependence had a heavy hand in shaping the rules you now live under. Funny how that works. The rules almost always make the do-it-yourself path harder and the hire a company path easier. That's not an accident. That's a pattern. But here's the door they left open, and it's a big one. Most of those grid rules only apply when you connect to the grid. When you build a small, separate system that stands on its own, off-grid, an island of your own power that never touches the utility's wires, you step around a whole mountain of that paperwork. You're not asking to join their system. You're quietly building your own beside it, and that, finally, brings me to you, the one sitting in an older home thinking this is all fine for somebody building new, but not for me. I want to talk straight to you for a minute because you're exactly who this was made for. You don't need a new house. You don't need to tear into your walls. You don't need to rewire anything or call anyone or pull a single permit for what I'm about to describe. You can do this in the next few days with parts that show up at your door. Here's the simplest version, the one I'd hand my own neighbor. Get one good rigid panel, two if you can swing it, get a good charge controller, get one battery, lithium if your budget allows, lead acid if it doesn't, and get a small inverter. Mount the panel where it can see the southern sky, and I'll tell you exactly how in a minute. Run the wire in through a window gap or a vent or a small hole you can fill later. Wire it up in the order I gave you. Panel to controller, controller to battery, inverter to battery. That's it. You now have a private little power plant that doesn't care what the grid does. And here's the part that makes it real. For an old house, you don't have to power the whole place to change your life. Start with the things that hurt the most when the power goes out or cost the most every month. Put your internet and your phone chargers on it so you're never in the dark and cut off at the same time. Put a few of your most used lights on it. Put a fan on it for summer. If you've got the panels for it, put a small chest freezer on it, and suddenly a power outage doesn't mean a freezer full of spoiled meat anymore. You can even do it without touching your house wiring at all. Just plug things directly into the inverter, like a power station sitting in the corner, no electrician, no inspector, no permission. A lot of our families run important things this exact way as a standalone island, and it is fully within your right to power your own devices off your own battery in your own home. Nobody can tell you that you may not plug a lamp into a battery you own. Do that one weekend, and something changes in you. The first night you sit under a light that the power company has nothing to do with, you feel it. It's quiet. It's yours. And you start looking at that monthly bill very differently. Now, the trick I promised. The thing about cold weather and placement that almost nobody out there seems to know, the thing that took me years around our settlements to fully understand, lean in, because this is the part that separates a setup that limps along from one that genuinely carries your home. Most English folks think solar panels love heat. Hot summer day, blazing sun, they figure that's when a panel is happiest. It's the exact opposite, and it's not even close. Solar panels hate heat. A panel actually loses power as it gets hot. On a scorching summer afternoon, a panel baking on a roof can lose around a tenth or more of its output just from the heat alone. The cells get hot and lazy, and the voltage sags. But on a cold, bright winter day, that same panel comes alive. Cold cells run at higher voltage. The electricity flows stronger and cleaner. I've watched panels on a crisp, clear day in the teens put out more than they ever did in July. That ticking I told you about, that first frosty morning out past Mount Hope, that was the sound of a panel doing its very best work in the cold. And here's where it gets even better, and this is the part that feels like a secret because almost no installer will mention it. Snow, fresh, clean snow on the ground in front of your panels acts like a giant mirror. It bounces sunlight back up onto the underside and face of the panels, and your output climbs. We call it the snow bounce, plainly enough. A clear, cold day after a fresh snow with the ground white and the sky deep blue can be one of the most productive days your panels see all year. The very weather everyone assumes kills solar is often when it's strongest. So here's how you actually use that, because knowing it isn't enough, you've got to set up for it. First, never lay your panels flat. Tilt them. A panel facing straight up collects snow, collects dust, and misses the low winter sun entirely. You want them tilted up at an angle, and a good rule a man can use without any fancy math is to set the tilt roughly equal to your latitude for an all-year setup. If you live up north where winters are long and that's when you need power most, tilt them even steeper for winter, steeper than you'd think, almost standing them up. A steep panel does three things at once. It catches that low winter sun straight on. It lets the snow slide right off the smooth glass so it keeps working, and it catches that bounce off the snow on the ground. Three gifts from one good angle. Second, point them at the true south, not just the south on your phone's compass. There's a small difference between magnetic south and true south, and getting it right squeezes out a little more every single day for the life of the system. And if you have to choose, aiming them a touch toward the west catches more of the late afternoon, when a household actually uses the most power when folks are home and the lights come on. Third, and this is the part I love because it costs nothing, mount them where the winter morning sun hits them first and isn't blocked by a tree or a shed or a hill to the southeast. A panel that wakes up an hour earlier on a short winter day gains you real power when you need it most. We always cleared a sight line to the southeast. Our grandfathers did the same thing, siting a house for the morning sun long before anyone said the word solar. Same wisdom, new tool. Now put it all together and feel what it means. The outside world tells you solar is a summer thing, a sunny place thing, a warm climate thing, and that if you live somewhere with real winters, you shouldn't bother. That is backwards. Cold, bright, snowy country is some of the best solar country there is if you simply tilt your panels steep, aim them true, and let the snow do its mirror work. The people who told you otherwise either didn't know or didn't want you to know, because a man who realizes his cold winters are an advantage is a man who's about to stop paying them. This is the knowledge that got pushed aside, not hidden in a vault, nothing so dramatic as that. Just quietly left out of the sales pitch, left off the brochure, never mentioned by the man in the clean truck, because the simple, cheap, do-it-yourself version doesn't make anybody rich, but it survived because communities like ours had every reason to keep it and no reason to forget it. We weren't trying to sell each other anything. We were just trying to keep the lights on and stay free. So the real knowledge got handed down, neighbor to neighbor, hand to hand, while the expensive version got handed down through showrooms, and now it's yours. You can buy the panels today. You can wire the 4 pieces on a kitchen table. You can tilt them steep and aim them true and watch them do their best work on the coldest, brightest day of the year while your neighbors think their solar should be sleeping. You can start with 1 panel and 1 battery, plug a lamp in, and feel that first quiet night of light that belongs to nobody but you. Let me say something about that feeling, because it's bigger than money, though the money is real too. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from understanding the things that keep your family alive. When you know how your light is made, when you can point at the panel and the box and the battery and explain each one to your child, when you can fix it yourself if it ever falters, you stop being afraid of the dark in a way you didn't even know you were afraid. The grid goes down in a storm, and your house stays warm and lit, and your children think their father is some kind of wizard. You're not. You just refuse to believe it was too hard. I think about the men who taught me calloused hands, no diplomas, patient as fence posts. They didn't have a word for voltage, drop, or charge cycles, but they understood every bit of it in their bones because they'd lived their whole lives storing summer against winter and plenty against want. They looked at the sun the way they looked at the woodlot and the garden and the ice pond, a resource, a gift you were foolish not to gather. The panels were new, but the thinking was ancient, and that's exactly why it worked. You were sold a story that you are a customer, a renter of your own light, dependent forever on a company that will never love you back. That story is a choice somebody made for you, and you can unmake it this weekend with 4 parts in an afternoon. That's the whole thing. That's what they'd rather you not sit and think about for too long. So let me leave you with this. The way a neighbor leaves you at the end of the lane when the talking's gone on past dark and it's time to go in. You didn't just learn how to wire a few parts together today. You got back something that was quietly taken from you a long time ago. The plain knowledge that you are capable of providing your own light and that you always were. That belongs to the kind of person who'd rather understand a thing than be sold it, who'd rather be free and a little tired than comfortable and owned. If that's you, then this was always yours. You just had to be told it out loud. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean really hear from you, because this audience reads and nods and never says a word, and I'm asking you to break that habit right now. Tell me this in the comments. If you built 1 small panel setup this month, what's the very first thing you'd put on it? The freezer, the lights, the internet, so you're never cut off in a storm? Tell me the one thing, and tell me where you live, north or south, because I want to see how many of you are sitting on that cold weather advantage and never knew it. Write it down. I read them. And if any part of this gave you back a little of that feeling that you can do more than you were told you could, then come walk with the rest of us who are quietly recovering this kind of knowledge, one old method at a time. Subscribe and stand with the folks who'd rather know than be kept in the dark, plainly and literally. Because next time, I'm going to show you how our people keep food cold through a whole summer with almost no electricity at all, using a trick with water and airflow and a north wall that the refrigerator companies would very much prefer you never tried. There's a sound that Springhouse makes on a hot day. Once you've heard it, you'll never look at your power bill the same way again. I'll tell you about it next time. Don't be a stranger. Before you go, let me hand you one more thing to chew on. Start smaller than you think you need to. One panel, one battery. Prove it to yourself with a single lamp burning on a winter night, and watch how fast the doubt drains out of you. Once you've felt that, you'll never again believe a man in a clean truck who tells you the sun is too complicated for plain folks like us. It never was, it never will be. Go build it. Here's the thing, this video gave you the overview, but stay with me inside the Old Ways workshop and I'll walk you through the full settlement build right where we left off. In there, you ask me your own question and I answer you myself. A real person. You won't be doing it alone, Old Ways builders, just like you are already inside. Point your phone's camera at the code on screen and cancel anytime. One click. Now, if you liked building this, wait until you see how to set up reliable solar for just $300 in about 2 hours that keeps working for years. I'll show you how right here. Let's begin.